Is the YouTube online yet? Yep. Excellent. Good morning, everyone. I'm Councillor Nigel Moxon, the chair of this committee, and I would like to welcome you all to the meeting of the Place Select Committee, which is being broadcast live and recorded for publication. So the first item on this morning's agenda is the minutes of the last meeting. Can I ask the committee if they approve of those minutes that have been previously circulated? Those in favour? Thank you very much. Those that were there, we'll sign those at the end. Next is apologies for absence. Kate.
Thank you. We've had apologies from Councillor Richard Butler for other County Council business. Councillor John O'Lee is substituting. And we've also had apologies from Councillor Tom Hollis for other reasons. Councillor Steve Carr is substituting.
Thank you very much for that. Item number 3, declarations of interest. If any councillor or officer has an interest in any matter on the agenda, you should declare it now. No? Excellent. Right. Agenda item number 4 is the crime and disorder strategy, the response to the recommendations. So I'm now going to ask Mark Walker to present this and then hand over. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Morning all. So, unfortunately, Councillor Cotty is unable to join us today at short notice. So, hopefully, item 4 on the agenda is a comprehensive response from Councillor Cotty to the resolution of the meeting of the 5th of July. I'm going to ask Vicky Cropley, who's Safe and Knots Board Programme Manager, some of you will remember from the last meeting, to give us a short introduction to the paper. And again, we're happy to take any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you. At the last meeting of this committee, the crime disorder strategy, which is the community safety agreement, was scrutinised, and during the discussions, Councillor Callaghan raised that the report should have acknowledged the resolved crime disorder motion that went to full council in March. The resolved motion is attached appendix 1 of the report. It was then agreed by the committee that a report come to this meeting for that purpose. So this report walks through each of the recommendations in the resolved motion, responding to each point raised. The recommendations from the motion include acknowledging rising crime rate, which is already established practice in identifying priorities for the community safety agreement. And it draws from the police and crime needs assessment, and then a refreshed needs assessment is reviewed as part of the annual review. And more information on this is shown at paragraphs 6 and 7. A further recommendation in the motion is about reporting current performance. A revised performance management approach will be considered by the Safe and Nottinghamshire Board at their meeting this coming Monday, and this proposes using the Nottinghamshire Police and Crime Plan update information used for the Police and Crime Panel as a basis to align reporting and also facilitate the required collaborative working between the Safe and Nottinghamshire Board and the Police and Crime Commissioner. The latest performance information is available now in the public domain in the papers for the Police and Crime Panel meeting that also takes place next Monday. The only S&B priority that isn't covered is prevent, and the performance information for this is included at paragraph 11 of the report. The motion recommends a review of current SMB priority leads, and this was done as part of developing the current community safety agreement, which started in April, and the rationale for each is shown at paragraph 12. The final recommendation of the motion is about publishing annual reports, and the report in front of you today explains at paragraph 14 why these aren't currently available, but this recommendation is included in the Safe and Nottinghamshire Board overarching delivery plan that the board will consider at its meeting on Monday. The recommendation for this report is at paragraph 21 is that the committee considers and comments on the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Right, I'll open it up to the floor. Has anybody got any questions or anything they wish to add? Yeah, Councillor Callaghan.
Oh, thank you. I'm just looking at your priority leads, and obviously the reducing offending. I guess you've changed the person in that, because obviously in the community safety agreement it was Caroline Henry, and now it's gone to the chief executive. Is there a reason for that, or why she came off of that? is it because you refreshed the community safety agreement in 2021, and Caroline was the person to be on that committee?
The latest community safety agreement started in April, so
Yeah.
Caroline Henry chaired one meeting when the old chair left, the previous chief exec of the PCC's office. She chaired one meeting while the new chief exec was being put in place, and now the chief exec's the named board lead.
Right, thank you for that.
Councillor Gowland.
One of the comments in the motion was to consider specific types of crime, and I can't see that, but I've got the document for the meeting of the PCC panel, the Police and Crime panel in September, where it talks about different types of crime, and it talks about a marginal increase in adult reoffending rates, which seems an unusual use of the word marginal. But I just wonder if this is anywhere broken down by different types of crime, particularly separating speeding offences and similar car crimes from other traffic crimes from other crimes.
Vicky, do you want to respond?
When we look at the police and crime needs assessment, that covers all kinds of crime. I'm not sure whether it breaks down road traffic related, but I can find that out and come back to you.
It would be good to really, because obviously that number is vague when it covers all crimes from, all crimes. It would be good, I think, to see it split down. Thank you.
Can I just the information that goes to the Reducing Reoffending Board and to the Safe Nottinghamshire Board will have more layers of information, so they know which particular cohorts they need to focus on. In terms of the priorities for the Reducing Reoffending Board, people involved in speeding aren't one of those cohorts. That doesn't mean it's not taken seriously and there isn't work done, but for the Reducing Reoffending Board, it's other things rather than women in the criminal justice system, things linked to substance misuse and various cohorts, so that the road traffic related isn't one of the cohorts for the Reducing Reoffending Board.
Thank you for that. Anybody else? Councillor Williamson.
Thank you. I welcome this report as it shows that all stakeholders are working together to combat crime across Nottinghamshire. The reality is, however, there remains issues with resident safety across this county, particularly women and girls. At the meeting last week of the Nottinghamshire Health and Wellbeing Board, when discussing the Joint Needs Assessment Work Programme, it was revealed that the fight against violence against women and girls, and I quote from the report, was not a priority. The report states it's been sidelined to allow new leadership and strategy arrangements to bed in locally. What does that actually mean in practice, please?
I can't speak for whoever wrote that, what they meant by that, but certainly within the community safety agreement, currently violence against women and girls is a subcategory of the serious violence priority. At the board meeting on Monday, it's been put to the board that violence against women and girls becomes a cross-cutting priority in its own right because of the importance and because there's the partnership strategy. So it's certainly within the Safe Nottinghamshire Board, which is all I can speak to. It's being put to the board on Monday, and I'd be surprised if they said anything, did anything other than agree it, that the violence against women and girls is a cross-cutting priority, not just a priority, single priority. It goes across all the themes of the SMB because of the importance of that agenda.
Is there anything else, Councillor Williamson? Okay. Councillor Oliver.
Apologise for repeating myself in these meetings, Chair, but isn't the reality that we're fiddling around the edges with bureaucracy whilst the overall responsibility for fighting crime lies with Nottinghamshire Police and its Crime and Police Commissioner? Paragraph 9 actually states that whilst the Police and Crime Commissioner is not a statutory member of the Safe Nottinghamshire Board, there is a duty to mutually cooperate. What does this even mean for us? Residents just want the basic rights done. It's a constant battle for me in town council meetings that we want more bobbies on the beat. We want not a fake police station in Eastwood where there's no front desk. Eastwood used to be a thriving place for combating crime. Now we're considered by the inspector one of the worst areas for drugs. Our police station sadly does nothing to make this any better or safer, and there is actually less bobbies on the street than there previously was. Whilst a lot in this report is laudable, do we agree with me that the single best thing that we can do to fight crime is to scrap the office of the Police and Crime Commissioner and use any money saved to put into our frontline policing, aka bobbies on the beat, and opening the stations such as Eastwood's front desk, and ensuring that we're putting out our finances and money into more fighting crime than previously?
Well, I'll answer that one first. So obviously we've got no control over whether the position of police and crime commissioner is right or wrong, and our we've got quite limited powers within that. So this committee isn't a committee to be making those sort of recommendations to government, whatever your personal or group views are towards it. I don't know whether there's anything in there that you can really answer, Vicky or Mark.
Just a couple of things. There isn't actually a definition of what mutual cooperation means, and we have quite a few bits of legislation that the S&B has considered that talk about due regard. So it's kind of locally we have to interpret what that means. Secondly, in terms of policing being the most important, but there is a massive prevention agenda that sits with other partners, including county council. So that don't want that to be overlooked in the focus on policing. Obviously, policing is a very important part of it, but the services we offer here are also absolutely crucial in terms of preventing crime.
Did you want to come back, Councillor Oliver?
With all due respect, I do believe that this committee does have a right to ask the government for the removal of the Police and Crime Commissioner, especially as county as a whole has the right to ask for that. Perhaps not this committee directly. And Vicky, I would just like to hear from yourself, as let's say the brain behind this report that's kind of there. What's your definition of mutual cooperation?
We're drawing from the same evidence base. So we've got the same understanding of what the crime picture is within their county, and that includes residents' voices through the police and crime survey. Then it's about how we work together on those same priorities. So we've not got separate work streams. We look at how we can join up to kind of maximise what we've got. So it's about that joint working.
And if I can just sort of interject as well, again, I reiterate what I said before. This committee is here to scrutinise the police department within Nottinghamshire County Council, of which a small part of is covered in this topic. Now, if groups or whatever want to put forward a motion to full council to get the council to officially say that they're want to get rid of the police and crime commissioner, that's fine, but we're not going to do that in this committee because that's not what this committee is here for. Next is Councillor Lee.
Chairman, thank you. It's an interesting point made by Councillor Oliver. We have seen the Police Crime Commissioner introduced many years ago. It was originally a Labour representative, now it's a Conservative one. Me personally, I think the new Conservative Police Crime Commissioner has probably done more for my area than the one before. We've seen more input in policing, we've seen more investment, we've seen Safe Streets 1 and Safe Streets 2 have major improvement for our area. And before then, I was an elected councillor for 8 years and never met the old Police Crime Commissioner once. We are aware, as most people will be here, that there will be a discussion with the mayoral and to see what happens with those positions and if they're rolled in or not. In Manchester, they haven't been rolled in, but we know elsewhere they have. But as far as I am concerned, to have that discussion now about getting rid of the Police Crime Commissioner on a political issue, let's be honest, it's political, when for my community alone, Newark Police Station was saved, and all the investment we're getting, it would be silly for me and my residents to get rid of the only Police Crime Commissioner who's actually done anything for Newark and Bolton.
Well, thank you for that. Again, I'll reiterate: we're not here to discuss the rights or wrongs of a police and crime commissioner in Nottinghamshire or elsewhere. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to point out to Councillor Lee that the Police and Crime Commission isn't responsible for police operations. What the things that you describe are all police operations, but there you go. Anyway,
I mean, can I come back? That's not the case.
Sorry,
The safety
I'm not being
streets is all-
controversial. I'm just
Councillor
pointing it
Lee.
out.
Councillor Lee, please.
I'm just pointing out the facts there, Councillor. Councillor Watson, also you said that we could put forward a motion to County Council calling for the removal of the office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. Well, you changed the rules and we wouldn't be able to put forward
Sorry,
a motion.
No, hang on. Let me clarify what I said. I said, and if I've slightly misspoken, but as far as I was concerned, I said that was up to individual groups to see if they wanted to put in a motion. Now, whether a motion or not is valid or whatever is not my decision. All I was trying to say was that's not something for this committee.
Right, okay. So this committee is a scrutiny committee. Well, it can scrutinise anything to do with this report, and if we think the Police and Crime Commissioner is an issue, then surely we can scrutinise that. But I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Intrain.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As someone who sits on the Nottinghamshire Police and Crime Panel, I think it's probably worth making a few points. I've had my own public thoughts made with regard to our police service in Nottinghamshire, particularly around the resources and the distribution of resources around the county. And so I certainly do share some of the concerns that have been mentioned. Whether that's within the remit of this committee to act upon, I'm not so sure. But living in a district that is the furthest away from all the central resources and contributes disproportionately higher than virtually every other district per person in the Nottinghamshire County, we feel certainly aggrieved at how some of the resources are distributed. That said, the Police and Crime Commissioner has brought in to Nottinghamshire Police more money for safer streets than any other county in the country. That's a fact. In terms of comments with regard to safety for women and girls, however it's noted in the report, the Commissioner does seem to focus on that very, very highly at every meeting that we have. And to be fair to her, that does seem to be one of her key things that she considers important. And there's lots of money spent on things like CCTV cameras and refuges and things like that. And I know that there's a lot of money spent on things like youth reoffending rates and trying to reduce those. Would we like to see more bobbies on the street? Absolutely. I certainly would. But one thing I would say is that a number of districts have representation on the police and crime panel, and it's notable that certain districts either do not attend at all. Well, it's not a case of here we go, Councillor Carr. If you're going to make the comments, then attend the meetings that your body's to. Excuse me.
Does Broxtowe send people?
I said there's certain districts that don't attend. There's one district that didn't attend for a year, and there's other districts that probably attend 50%. And as I said at a recent full council meeting, I urge all districts to send their representatives to all the meetings of the police and crime panel so that they can represent their communities rather than any political views. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? So I'll just hand over to Martin a second.
Yeah, it is a little bit confusing, I think, with what we're looking at. I will just quote the section from the Constitution, which is at page 95. So with crime and disorder, the Police and Justice Act 2006, section 19 requires every local authority to have a crime and disorder committee, which must scrutinise the delivery of crime and disorder strategies. Place select committee will fulfil this requirement. The responsible authorities which are delivering these strategies and which are subject to a report from such a scrutiny committee must respond to the report and have regard to it when exercising its functions, and that's what we've been hearing about this meeting and the last meeting. They're also subject to the requirement to provide information and to attend meetings of the committee to answer questions. These committees are distinct from the police and crime panels that scrutinise directly elected police and crime commissioners. So that just for information, but it's there on page 95 if anyone just wants to go back to it. But it is a little bit confusing when we're just getting to grips with it.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor Carr, you want to come?
Yes, can we just nip this in the bud now? It needs to be noted that there is a full contingent of independent aligned councillors here today scrutinising this report. And I can also point out that these accusations keep being made by members of the Conservative group about non-attendance. At the last Health Scrutiny Committee, the chairman said that Councillor Darby hadn't been to the new.
Yeah, sorry, we're going a bit slightly off track here. It's noted. It'll be noted in the minutes that all of the Independent Alliance members are here today at this meeting, or your full allocation of people.
Sorry, this is important, Chair. A chair of a scrutiny committee said that a councillor had not attended a meeting when she had, and she spoke.
Councillor Carr.
And she spoke.
Councillor Carr.
How do we know that it's right that people haven't attended?
Councillor Carr, that is nothing to do with the Police Scrutiny Committee. If you have an issue with what's happening at another scrutiny select committee, then I suggest you take that up with the monitoring officer.
I have an issue with something that's been said which can't be proved at this meeting, and it shouldn't be said if that's the case.
Well, then,
you need, as chair, you need to stop it from happening.
Well, so I didn't fully hear what was said. All I'm saying is you've raised the point about the number of Independent Alliance members that are here today. It will be duly noted in the minutes that all of your group's allocation is at the meeting, and I think that brings that to an end. Anybody else? Councillor Gowland, sorry.
The whole Labour group's here too. Unfortunately, I wasn't at the last meeting. Sorry about that. So it means I'm not quite aware of the conversation that went on that led to these comments here at the beginning of this, the required report here. But I'm not quite sure this report actually does address the questions at the beginning. So includes information around performance issues. Provides information of the suitability of those assigned to lead on the priorities. So it states who they are. It doesn't discuss who they are. And in terms of the issue about performance issues, so the answer is, it seems to be, it's going to be reported elsewhere. And I do feel this is a bit of a dog's dinner of different organisations trying to get involved in this, or being asked to get involved in this. But I do feel that the areas which Nottinghamshire County Council staff are responsible for, it would be good to actually see the results in these areas more specifically than just, it's in another document somewhere else. I don't quite feel this addresses the original questions.
Yeah, Vicky, do you want to come back on that one? Or?
The information that's referenced in terms of available elsewhere that will be the information that forms the basis of what goes to the Safe Nottinghamshire Board, and then would be also shared with yourselves. So at the moment, it's the same information, but if there's a recommendation in terms of wanting more depth of information, then obviously.
Will those papers come back to Place Committee at a future date?
Well, they're in the public domain now, but we can, when the strategy comes again next year for scrutiny, we can bring more detailed if that's what's wanted.
And this subject is due on the agenda again, I think in March. Yeah, March. March is just confirmed. So, and this is an annual thing that has to come back every year. So it will be back in Marches anyway. If does that answer that sort of for now covers you. Anybody else before we wrap this one up? Okay, so the only recommendation is that this is noted by the committee, so I'll formally propose that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Introna, thank you very much. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much for your attendance, Vicky. Next on the agenda is the progress report on work with the Joint Waste Management Board to increase recycling rates. Hand over to Councillor Neil Clark to introduce this.
Thank you very much, indeed, Chairman. To be honest, I don't have a lot to say on it because it is a report back basically on the operations of the Joint Waste Management Board. It's probably more appropriate to see if there are any questions that need answering. If it's a policy question, I'm happy to take it. But I've got Mick Allen here with me, who can answer any of the technical questions. I'll just make one reference to paragraph 11 in relation to the outcomes of the discussions of the board, and really just highlight, I think, one of the main activities to be undertaken, I think, is to keep enhancing the communications by collection authorities with residents, to keep focusing on promoting and encouraging more and more recycling, and to reduce the amount of waste that they produce that cannot be recycled. And that's just an ongoing message that we just need to keep pushing out constantly. But apart from that, maybe it's better just to see what questions arise, Chairman.
Thank you very much. First up was Councillor Lee.
Chairman, thank you. I'm going to be honest. I do not know what recycling every district does. I don't. I represent Newark and Sherwood in a different area, and I know that we've just announced in January our glass collection that will increase our recycling. However, I am aware that nearly 15 years ago there was a policy by Newark and Sherwood District Council to gift compost bins out to our houses, and that recycling that is composting has never been recorded. There's no way of really recording it. And the question is how many councils are doing things that just isn't recordable? We know that in Newark and Sherwood in particular, we have allotments that compost and recycle. We have loads of areas, but we have no way of putting it on a piece of document. So even though we're looking at example Mansfield 19.5 recycling, are they doing anything else that just isn't recording? That's the question.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. Obviously, green garden waste collections are recorded, but the compost bins that Councillor Lee is talking about, I happen to know several districts, Rushcliffe many years ago, had a campaign of issuing the home composting bins. And yeah, there isn't any way of recording that because how do you go around inspecting everybody's gardens? How much have you put in your composting bin this week, etc.? All you can do is try to encourage people. Mick, I don't know if you have anything.
No,
else.
I think that's absolutely right. We would encourage people to home compost. We'd encourage people to reduce the amount of waste they produce. That's great, isn't it? The less waste that's handled by all of the partners, the less cost, the less impact on the environment. But yeah, we've over many years lobbied for counting the number of home composters that are sold or gifted out by authorities towards those figures. But as Councillor Clark said, it's been impossible to count, and certainly centrally, it's never been a thing that they can do. But yeah, it's the right thing to do still.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Wheeler.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So on point 17 with the breakdown of the recycling composting, it would be useful in future if we could have recycling broken down further, because obviously we talk about the fact that every district is different in terms of the curbside glass collection and food waste, etc. Where, for example, Rushcliffe, we had to bring 2 sites, and I know other districts have the curbside, especially where they had it paid for by government. So if we have that broken down, it's going to help us, I think, to look at the figures and to see what's working in particular districts and how we can, look at how we can help some of the districts that perhaps aren't where they should be. The second point is around the rejection of recycling and contaminated recycling, because I've noticed a report from Derby City Council where they're saying it's costing them £450,000 every year in rejected recycling. So it'd be useful again if we could have those figures to see what it's costing us as a council here and potential districts, again, see what we can do around communication. I note in one of the appendices about the joint recycling board, where it's all about communication campaign. For me, that's key, because there's still a lot of packaging out there, for example, where part of it you can recycle, part can't. How many people are just assuming and throwing it straight into the recycling, and how we can better work together to communicate that message, because it's the same for every district council in terms of what we can get that message out there to hopefully increase recycling rates. Thank you.
Councillor Clark or Mick?
Yeah, well, on the recycling rates, I just wish we, when I say we, I'm talking about everybody, the whole population in the county could recycle an awful lot more. No matter what the combined rate is, I'm disappointed that they're all below 50%. I wish that they were all way above 50%, and so it's something that we all need to keep concentrating on. On the subject of contamination, I'll ask Mick if he can give more detailed information.
Thank you. Yes, contamination is a nightmare for us. Contamination rates vary across the county, sort of between 10 and 20%, depending on individual districts, and we know that's a real problem. And that's obviously a lot of the work that we do around the communications is to try and make sure that people are putting the right stuff in the right bin. And I think we said previously in earlier reports that if we captured the good stuff out of the residual bin into the recycling and kept all the stuff the other way around, we'd actually be at 50% anyway, because the numbers would sway so far. And we do recognise that contamination is a significant cost as well to all of us. So that's a focus of the work that we do through that those communication campaigns, and obviously is good use of public money in a lot of ways because of the costs associated with dealing with the differential price between recycling and disposal of residual waste. In terms of just on the recycling, we can absolutely provide breakdown between difference between curbside and bring site, etc. We have all those figures in the background, so we can break those down into more detail. To some degree, it's swings and roundabouts. Just to highlight on that, because obviously, in reality, Rushcliffe colleagues recycle really high, but don't have a curbside glass service, whereas others who do are still lower down the table. So it depends. It's very much a mix of service provision, whether that's provided through the bins that are picked up, or whether it's actually through a better curbside provision through bring size. So there's no one size fits all on that. But we are consistent in terms of the recycling offer across the county. Other than that, that curbside glass, which obviously is in some places and not others, everything else is consistent, chargeable green waste, and the same mix of recycling in all areas within the bins.
Yeah, and thank you very much for the response. I think that's the key point I said about the difference about the glass recycling. So, for example, we know it's a huge cost to bring in curbside glass recycling if you're not getting paid by government. No, I think it was over £1 million. I remember the quote from Newark, if I remember, on the press. So, if we would have that breakdown to show, actually, is it that cost effective, or is it our bring sites working one borough, or perhaps that can look at another district to do instead of introduce it, just to, again, not only help our district colleagues, but also at the same time for us to look at feedback in for the joint recycling board about what actually works in terms of not just cost effectiveness, but actually ultimately to recycle more. Thank you.
Councillor Gowland.
Thank you. This may be partly a question for the districts, but I just wonder how many people in Nottinghamshire don't have space for 2 bins. So how many people actually don't even try to recycle? Because I guess in flats and so on, there's often not enough room, and in some of the areas, certainly in West Bridgend, where it's very small houses, getting 2 bins on the frontage is difficult. My second question is, are there areas where the recycling is heavily contaminated, and do you have a plan to highlight what to do with those? And maybe that the answer may not be to try not to recycle, because you'll know people who just don't even try. And finally, what about food waste? Because the composting in some areas, in home composting in some areas will include food waste, some areas won't. And I wonder what the plan is for that. I'm also sad to see Rushcliffe is not leading in recycling anymore.
Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. First of all, on the number of bins, it depends entirely on the makeup of the houses and the streets. And as Councillor Gallen knows, very close to here, a good example, Exchange Road, a row of terraced housing where obviously you can't have sort of loads and loads of bins outside, and it's difficult for some types of houses to accommodate lots of bins. The flats often have the bigger communal commercial bins, so it's always a challenge to do that. And part of it will obviously be down to, and again, as Councillor Gallen well knows, as a district planning authority for new developments to try and plan spaces for bins. Difficult to achieve, obviously, for existing houses that have been around for 50, 100, 200 years or whatever. But certainly we need to try and work together to achieve what we can. On food waste, I think Mick, we're still waiting for Environment Bill, etc. If Mick, you want to take over?
Yeah, so do food waste first. Yeah, we are waiting for the legislation. Primary legislation is going through at the moment. Everyone will be expected to have a curbside collection of food waste over the next few years. We're working towards a date of October 27. That's the provisional date we've got with DEFRA. Again, that hasn't yet been through the legislation, but that's a date they've notified us of. So that'll be across all of the districts in the county for that point in time. And we are already planning that with both Veolia but also the districts, starting to work that through because of obviously leading times on vehicles, etc., etc. In terms of contamination, the sampling that's done through the dry recyclables is done at the MRF actually, but it can be done at the transfer station as well. So we have targeted particular areas in the past. The districts obviously know the streets that are bad. And you're right, in some areas, and Councillor Wheeler referenced Derby, but we know Derby withdrew recycling services from certain areas because they were getting such high contamination rates. We have had some of those conversations with, obviously, district colleagues. That's not something anybody would like to do. What we want is consistent performance across all of the streets and specific targeted support and help into those areas where they're struggling. But we can target individual rounds, we can target individual vehicles if we know that's coming from a particular area. Obviously, with a round doing whatever it is, 1,000 properties or whatever in a day, 1,400 properties, whatever they do now, that's difficult because that's a lot of waste coming from a lot of areas. So you only need 2 or 3 properties to be really bad in order to have that negative impact on the overall recycling performance, because it, food waste, liquid waste into paper, and it ruins the whole load. And we know that's a key focus. But we do work with the districts, and obviously we can actually sample specific areas if they want to do that. And we do that, and we provide them with weekly contamination data across. We provide it monthly, but for weekly contamination data across all of the county. And I say we do target and work closely with them where they want to look at specific areas in order to address a problem that they know they might have.
Yeah.
Sorry, and I do remember that previously you told me not to ask several questions at once, so I'll try and do it again. On the 2 bins issue, I wonder if there's been any thought about having a more relevant solution to the areas. So, maybe having communal bins. I know people don't like that, or some sort of street side bin rather than trying to have it on the frontages, or shared bins even. And also the primary legislation. We've waited forever. Let's hope it doesn't get cancelled in the meantime. But I guess you might say it's a district issue, but are there other solutions to these bins? Because I think they just don't work in some places.
I think, Chairman, essentially it's mainly a district issue because it's up to collection authorities to decide on what regime works for their particular areas. But obviously, the disposal authority also needs to have some input into being able to. It's okay if the collection authority decides on a particular regime, but they've got to be able to dispose of whatever scheme that they've put in place. So it's largely a collection authority responsibility, and I'm afraid it is repetition. But until we know what the Environment Bill finally says, etc., then it's still a bit of a waiting game.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carr.
A little bit of a word in the horizon that could completely skew this is the threat of a GMB strike with regards to waste depots, etc. And I just wondered if to clear up some confusion as to who is responsible for what when it comes to waste, could the portfolio holder just clarify what Nottinghamshire's role is with regards to waste collection and disposal.
What, in relation to GMB strike, or just in relation to?
Yeah, obviously the boroughs are responsible for collecting the waste.
Yeah, well, in just very basic terms, district councils are collection authorities. It's up to district councils to decide on the most appropriate scheme for collecting the waste, and then county council is the disposal authority who is responsible for taking on that waste and getting rid of it, basically. So, collection authority, district councils, disposal authority, county councils. But obviously, they need to work together to ensure that the collection regime that the districts have decided actually works. But there's no point in collecting waste and then saying, well, the disposal authority is saying, well, we haven't got the means to dispose of that, so that ain't going to work. So, and that's partly the reason there's the Joint Waste Management Board. There are regular meetings which Mick and his colleagues attend with district councils, collection authorities, to make sure that the two authorities are working together.
Given that, and I fully accept that, what happens if the contractor doesn't fulfil their contract because their members go out on strike?
Right, so we've got around to the nub of what it was all about in the first place. It's Veolia's members that are on strike, so they are the contractors that work for the county council, so it's Veolia's responsibility. Having said that, county officers are working with Veolia to ensure that whatever happens in the strike, that there are contingency plans in place. We don't know, for instance, as an example, whether drivers who are maybe members of the similar union, whether they cross picket lines. If they don't, then we are working with Veolia to ensure there are contingency plans in place to divert them to other transfer stations. So I'm confident that we have sufficient, well, for a start, there have been lots of discussions, meetings I talked about between collection and disposal authorities. There have been 3 meetings already since last Friday regarding the strike, and I know there are other ones already planned in the next few days to keep in constant touch to ensure that contingency plans can be versatile, flexible, and change according to whatever circumstances actually arise with the strike. So I'm confident that there are sufficient discussions and plans in place to cope with whatever, well, I want to say whatever arises, whatever reasonably arises, I think, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I think that clarifies that. Councillor Carr seems satisfied with that one. Next is Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Chairman. My experience of life, many problems are partly or mainly caused by poor communication. So I absolutely support the view that we should have regular and continuing communications to residents across the county about what goes in what bin. I say that from recent conversations as well I've had with new residents in Rushcliffe, where they've come from out of county to new housing estates or from other districts and boroughs within the county, and quite frankly that they've put glass into Rushcliffe blue bins, which we don't have, in all ignorance. So I mean, I think I heard correctly from Mick that if I or they put a glass jar into my blue bin, I contaminate the whole of that lorry's load. Yeah, I thought that was correct. That's quite worrying, frankly. And so the need for communication, regular communication. And I think I'm correct in saying an item such as a contaminated food on a pizza box, I for many years was under the view that, well, it's cardboard, I'll put it in the blue bin. Apparently not. I've learned that over time, but a lot of people you talk to in conversation haven't a clue. Back to communication. I think you need to give some examples. Food in a pizza box, no. Glass, no. And then the whole world of plastic is a nightmare for me. It must be for others. And I blame the manufacturers and the people that package this stuff as to the very small detail, if any, as to, yes, you can put this plastic in the blue bin, or no, you can't. So back to communication. Communication, communication, communication. Regularly, all the time. Thank you.
I just make one comment, Chairman, obviously slightly tongue-in-cheek, but I think perhaps we ought to make it mandatory that every resident in the county has an advanced degree in advanced knowledge of plastics and every formula of every plastic ever invented, so that everybody knows exactly which plastic, punnet, or anything else can be recycled. I'm really just sharing Councillor Upton's pain to a certain extent. The sooner we can get to a regime where everything can be recycled, the better. And it's incumbent upon all of us, whoever, to discuss with the industry that produces these things in the first place, is only to produce punnets or things that can be recycled. And just putting a symbol on a punnet to say this can be recycled. Yes, it probably can be recycled in one very small, limited place somewhere isolated. It probably can be, but for the vast majority of places, they probably haven't got the facility to recycle it. So I suppose we're back to communication again and cooperation, and I just wish that we could do more to limit the waste at source, whether it's packaging people producing packaging or whether it's people producing plastic or whatever. We need to limit that in the first place.
Yeah, thank you for that, and I'll reiterate that. And certainly, I learned a lot when a few of us here went to the recycling centre, which is in my division, funnily enough, in Mansfield, and so I certainly learned a huge amount of little things that I was doing wrong that I was ignorant to. Quite frankly, I wasn't doing it deliberate. I thought I was helping, and I was inadvertently hindering. So. It's a shame that everyone in the whole county can't be made to go to visit that. I'm sure it'd be an eye opener, but certainly the work that they do in terms of getting schools to go round, I think is a great piece of work, and it's a good way of communicating. I've got Councillor Introna next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to allude to that same visit myself to the Veolia waste recycling facility, and certainly around plastics. I was quite bemused at the difficulties they have in dealing with black plastic, just in terms of the sensors not being able to pick it out. I'm sure that manufacturers and suppliers can do something about that quite easily. The other thing that was of note to me was one of the comments that if people put the right things in the right bin, that recycling rates would double, which again comes back to this whole theme around communication. I certainly concur with the comments about reject rates. I think it's important that we know that we're not just seeing a table here, which with a couple of exceptions, I don't think is going to keep changing month on month or whenever we meet and get these reports. And certainly, I think it's important, taking Councillor Gowland's point at looking at where we've got high densities of populations or multiple occupancy, looking at how we're going to look at that in future to improve recycling rates there. I think, to be fair, we've got to say well done to Ashfield and well done to Rushcliffe at being at 21.3, 20.8. But it really, from my point of view, being a Basset Law councillor, I have to wonder is why is Basset Law's rate 38? Why is Ashfield 38% in front of Basset Law? Why is Rushcliffe 35% in front of Basset Law? Is it reject rates? What's the reason? Because as a committee and as a council, we need to be pushing those things and understanding the numbers a little more clearly. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I find it very frustrating that there's such a vast disparity in recycling rates across the county. As I said earlier, I wish just everything was a lot higher. I just asked whether Mick wants to just give a bit more detail about the disparity.
Yeah, you might think reject rates were part of that, but actually Bassett Law have a very good rate in terms of contamination because they actually did a lot of work over the last couple of years. They worked closely with RAP to have campaigns specifically targeted at particular materials. The Bassett Law issue is simply that they collect less recyclers. So there's a note in here that we're actually having some composition analysis done. So we've employed guys to go, and we haven't directly, but we've got a specialist out who are going to be rummaging through the bins to find out what's in the residual waste and the recycling waste to see what's good and what's bad and what could be captured. So it appears in Bassett Law particularly to be very much around capture rates. Just people aren't necessarily putting it in the recycling bin when they could, because actually there's very little, but it is one of the better authorities in terms of contamination rates. So it's not as though they're the 20%ers. They're not. There are others that are 20%, Bassett Law are nearer that 10. So it is simply just that we're not capturing it. Now again, that may just be the messaging and how that messaging is put out there. But there is this ridiculous fact nationally that only 50% of plastic bottles get captured for recycling. Well, how can that be? Plastic bottles are plastic bottles. It's very easy to recycle a plastic bottle, and it's very obvious what one is. Yet still, lots of them disappear into the residual waste. And they're the sort of things that we're trying to get heads around. And again, there's a suggestion in there around some work that Neil Sherwood are keen on, which is a bit of research around best practice elsewhere as well, just to understand how that messaging can be tweaked and be adjusted to particular areas. It's very difficult because we've been doing this for a long, long time, and we have got very consistent messages, and we've got a suite of information that's available through Veolia for all of the districts to use for consistent sort of promotional literature. But that message doesn't always hit home the same in different areas. So I think there's still more work to be done about understanding how that can be targeted into particular patches and identifying what those specific areas are, specific issues. Yeah, whether there are more plastic bottles in the residual in Bassett Law than other areas, I don't know, but we will have that information over the next few months as that research is done.
Okay, thank you. Might I just add as well, just respectfully suggest that given how well received by everyone that was on the trip to the Forest Town site, that invitation is extended not just to all county council members, but all district council members in the county, because I think it's just too important a subject for us to be, talking politics or whatever. This is something that's important, and we all have a responsibility to work together and contribute to improving these rates. Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman. Well, that already exists because I've been to the Murph at Forest Town as both a district councillor and as a county councillor. So those invitations are already issued, but maybe we can encourage Veolia to expand them and make them more frequent, because I take your point. There are always new district councillors coming on councils, and I don't mean this disparagingly. They're ignorant or naive just purely because they don't know. Education and encouragement is always to be applauded.
Sorry, just to add very briefly to that session that you attended, that was actually originally set up for the districts. So it's tweaked slightly to reflect the membership of this group, but we do that to the districts, for the districts, at any point in time. People are welcome to come along to the Murph and have those specific events targeted to their districts or countywide or whatever else. But we are organising some sessions over the next couple of months specifically for all the new district and borough councillors that have come in from May's elections, because there are a lot. So we're trying to do that, and I think it was clear at the last Joint Waste Management Board that a number of the new members that are on the board probably have a bit of learning to do in order to understand their individual roles and their authorities' roles, as well as what we do and why we do it in the way we do. So we do those, and we specifically target those immediately after elections, because we are quite good in terms of the consistency in terms of roles within those areas. If somebody's doing environment for a district, they tend to do it for a 4-year term, and actually that's really good for us. But it can take quite a while for that knowledge base to build, because they're not all involved in waste on a day-to-day basis. Some people have been there a long time, some haven't.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Lee.
Chairman, thank you for letting me come back in. It's really interesting. My area, like lots of areas, is new. We have loads of new developments coming in, and we have lots of people from Lincolnshire, Manchester, all moving into our area. And the one thing that I always get told is, why is it different? Why are you different colour bins? Why do you have 3 bins in one area, 2 bins in another area? You can do this plastic, you can do glass, you can't do glass here, you can do this. And it's very, very complicated that we have 8 districts, I believe 8 districts, if I'm doing my maths right, but every single district has a different system, different coloured bins. And when I was first ever elected, I was asked, if I had a magic wand, what would I do? And that would be to make sure every district have the same coloured bins in the same system. I get that we can't, and I know Councillor Clark's ready to come in there, but just wait a minute. I get that we can't, and I get it's down to funding as well, to the districts, what they're able to fund and what they're able to do. And I also look at the figures that Ashfield have a massive recycling, but they have really low compost, and that's probably down to them being less rural than others. I get that, and that's why they probably won't put as much money into the composting as the recycling. But is it not feasible that the county council, and I'm probably going to get shouted at now by my district council partners, that the county council should be running the same system across all the districts, would streamline it, make it easier, make recycling rates higher because everybody's got the same system? Or is it just not feasible?
Councillor Lee must have been listening to conversations I've had many, many, many years ago in a previous role in Rushcliffe Borough Council, where we got extraordinarily close, and I thought that it was going to be achieved. And by the way, you've overestimated it. 7 district councils, not 8 districts, but never mind. We got so close to all the districts agreeing to one regime, and I thought that it was going to be achieved, and then suddenly it fell apart. And actually, despite that, we are still closer than you probably think. It's only really glass that's causing the main issues, and then just a little minor matter of colour of bins. And you can't suddenly change or unify all the colour of bins, because the cost would be extra. And imagine the waste, the plastic waste as well. Yes, we'd be rather shooting ourselves in the foot then, wouldn't we? So, yeah, if there was a way of us maybe trying to unify the colour of bins, or maybe of new acquisitions, but then the trouble is that would then be confusing in the transitional period, and you might end up with so much contamination that Mick might have a nervous breakdown. But I hope not.
Well, we certainly don't want that, Mick. So we'll possibly not recommend that at the end of this. Next, I've got Councillor Carr.
Councillor Lee stole my thunder, but I would mention that when Councillor Upton started talking about blue bins, all us who by fluke today or from Broxtowe looked at each other and said, "What's a blue bin?" We don't have blue bins in Broxtowe.
Come to Rushcliffe and you'll find out.
Yeah. I would like to say, though, that the figures in Part 17 are mixed, aren't they? I mean, to be honest with you, Ashfield used to be really low in their recycling rate, so that they have done well. Whereas my own borough, I'm afraid, have gone backwards. We used to be in the early 40s, which is a little bit of a worry for me. What I would like to say is that we really, really do need the government to come forward with the extended producer responsibility, which they've been promising for a long time, so that we can actually increase the number of things that we are able to recycle. I know that will happen because we're reviewing the contract and everything, and we'll probably be introducing more stuff. But it is a bit of a disappointment to me that that's still not been forthcoming. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I just quickly, Chairman. I mean, I think, as I've said, I'm repeating myself. I said earlier, I think they're all disappointing. To be honest, I mean, Rushcliffe used to be 54% and rising. So even that's sort of gone into reverse. So somehow we've just got to find a way of really promoting and encouraging more recycling.
Yeah, I think lots of agreement around the room that everyone was nodding as you were speaking. Then next, I've got Councillor Ogle.
Chairman, yeah, I've attended the recycling facilities of both the district and the county council so many times. Bassett Law, they talk the talk, but they don't always walk the walk. And in my own village, we've had a glass, in fact, a large bottle glass recycling facility removed. Now that's been there for years and years. It gets full fairly rapidly. I don't want to comment on the alcoholic consumption of my people around me, or it's certainly not me. Just want to make that clear. But the designated site that we've been asked to go to is at the far side of Councillor Introna's area. It's only 3 miles down to Councillor Introna, or just over. And yeah, it's 4.5 miles the other side of his area where we're designated. So that's not environmentally friendly, and it's certainly aggressive, and it's likely that that recycling will fall further, and that the bins are going to be fouled up by people who perhaps can't or won't go down 5 miles to this facility. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, bring sites to district council responsibility, I'm afraid. So again, it is a bit frustrating, Councillor, as you say. We'll flag that because actually, yeah, absolutely, it's a really key part of the system is those local bring sites, particularly where you don't have a curbside service that mirrors that. And we know that that's why Rushcliffe do really well, because they have bring sites in very considered and strategic places rather than necessarily places that are just convenient for the district council rather than the public. So there does need to be a proper strategy around those bring site provisions that aligns with other stuff.
Councillor Gowland.
Thank you. So there's been some talk about these rates falling. Earlier in the summer, for reasons that are complicated, I was actually living in an HMO in Rushcliffe, and there was a very clear problem with the bins. That was delivery packaging, and the recycling bin was full immediately. It was emptied of masses and masses of cardboard, and then of course I imagine what happened was people who are less, pedantic than me stuck their recycling in the grey bin because the blue bin was full. So I wonder, are you aware of the impact of deliveries on this, and is there a plan to do something about it? Thanks.
Councillor Clark's our Amazon expert anyway, as I understand it. You've been around the site, haven't you, at Mansfield? But we are aware of it, clearly. And again, COVID has increased massively the number of home deliveries that people have across the whole piece, and it's continuing that. We do know that cardboard is now a significantly higher proportion of the recyclable waste stream, but it is recyclable. But you're right. In reality, in certain places, particularly where the communal bins, etc., they can fill a whole bin up, which does discourage other use. I think obviously our district colleagues are also aware of that, and they're clearly trying to kind of plan how that works. What I would say is that a lot of packaging, whilst I would still say it's excessive in a lot of ways, but generally, if it's appropriately flattened, you can still get a lot of it in your bin. So there isn't a reason to, even in my house, the amount of stuff we get through Amazon creates a lot of cardboard. But if you properly flatten it, it does go in your bin. It doesn't necessarily take sufficient capacity away from other things to mean that you're short of overall space. I think it is more of an issue around those communal bins, absolutely. And again, we'll take that back and have that conversation with the district colleagues, because obviously that how they manage those communal sites is a key issue for them. And we know again that does have an impact across certain areas more than others because of social housing arrangements.
Student areas as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and it is an impact in Broxton, and we recognise that. What I would say on the figures, just put a bit of context into the figures that are in front of you. These are actually last year's, so the green waste figures are actually quite a long way down last year because of the ridiculous temperatures. People's lawns didn't grow for large parts of last year, so whilst the dry recycling figures are probably about what you'd expect and be consistent, the actual green waste compost figures are slightly less reliable for last year because of the exceptional weather, and particularly defend Rushcliffe particularly, but because they rely so heavily on green waste as towards their overall performance, that's clearly had a significant impact on their outturns for last year. Other people who have less green waste collections at the curbside, which is basically everybody else, it's less of an impact because they still rely on the same dry recyclables to keep the numbers up.
Chairman, just to add, Mitch mentioned the visit to Amazon, etc., and there we were seeing the different sizes of cardboard cartons, etc., and this is back to limiting the amount of waste produced by people in the first place. And whilst they had a range of cartons, that you could end up with something the size of my pen going in a blinking great carton, which is just ridiculous. And so we were trying to encourage them to change their regime. I can understand why, from a business point of view. If you have lots and lots of different size cartons, then it's going to increase their costs. So they were limiting the number of different size cartons because of cost. But it's a question of encourage them to only use a carton that's appropriate for whatever size product they're sending.
Okay, I don't think anybody else. Oh, sorry, Councillor Williams, I missed you. Sorry.
Can I just say there is a way to cut down on Amazon packaging, and that's use your high street and not use Amazon. Go to your shop and take your bag with you, and then you won't have any cardboard. Yeah. Thank you.
First class advice, absolutely. That's something we can all agree with, I think. Go on.
So then what you've just said, Councillor Clark, is that Amazon are reducing their costs by using bigger boxes. So shouldn't the council, as the waste disposal authority, be asking the government to include in the environment bill some kind of charge or levy on the delivery companies to make sure that this cost is included in their business model? Because what they're doing effectively is pushing the cost of this packaging onto us as council.
We've already actually asked that, but can I just clarify? Councillor Gavin slightly misunderstood what I said. I didn't say larger cartons were reduced in cost. What I meant was they reduced the number of different sizes, so that if they had a greater number of sizes of carton, that would reduce. But the whole point is we need to encourage them to reduce the whole production of them in the first place.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to hand over to Martin, who's picked up a couple of recommendations. Oh, sorry, Councillor Cargill.
I suggest a recommendation as well, if possible, with regards to the GMB. Oh, I was going to say, with regards to the GMB strike, can we be kept up to date by email of what's happening with regards to that, the committee?
Well, I don't think that needs a formal recommendation. I think we'll when we've got something specific to report as appropriate, we can circulate members. But I don't think it wouldn't be appropriate. I don't think well, it's your decision to have a formal recommendation in here.
Well, what I was going to suggest, Councillor Cole, was Martin's written down a number of things that he's picked up during the meeting. If we just quickly run through those, and then we can. I'm happy to add recommendations on if that's what members want to do. So.
Okay, thank you. Probably need wording up a little bit better, but from listening to obviously what you've been talking about, so firstly you'd like to note the report, and then we'll request that if information could be circulated to the committee that shows the recycling broken down by glass, what part is glass, and obviously a request for the breakdown, what is curb and what is bring site. The information on the contamination rates is also circulated to members of the committee. That the invite to the materials recovery facility with district council colleagues is reaffirmed, and that the committee notes that effective communication strategies and methods with residents on what should be recycled and can be recycled should be a key focus of activities for the Joint Waste Management Board.
Okay, so I would suggest that we take those recommendations first, and I'll come back to you, Councillor Carr, if that's all right. So I'll formally propose those recommendations that Martin just read out. Do I have a seconder for those? Councillor Carr, thank you very much. All those in favour of those recommendations? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Councillor Carr, do you want to put your recommendation?
It doesn't need to be a recommendation, to be honest with you. I think we've had a verbal promise from the portfolio holder that they will keep members of this committee up to date with regards to what's happening and the what mitigations, any new ones that come in. I don't think it needs to be a formal recommendation.
It will come through the council comms, Chairman.
Yeah. Okay. If we're all happy with that, then that's great. Thank you very much. Right. Thank you very much for that. We'll move on to our next item on the agenda, which is the. I have totally lost my agenda. Sorry. It's the flood. Thank you. I knew it was something to do with that. It's item number 6, the Section 19 report regarding flooding in Ravenshead.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, flooding in Ravenshead. Having said that, I'm immediately going to introduce the expert who knows 100, if not 1,000 times more about it than I do. So Sue Jakes leads the flood team, so ask Sue to lead on that.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everybody. This report sets out the County Council's duties as a lead local flood authority on flooding incidents under Section 19 of the Flood and Water Management Act. This Section 19 is brought in relation to flooding that occurred earlier this year on the evening of Saturday, the 29th of April in Ravenshead. As I'm sure you're all aware, the purpose of a Section 19 report is to outline what happened during the event and whether all the relevant risk management authorities exercise their respective responsibilities. It's not designed to deliver solutions at that point in time. So the torrential downpour that resulted in localised flooding in Ravenshead resulted in 9 residential properties and 1 business suffering devastating internal flooding, and many more properties were scarred by garden and outbuilding flooding. You might notice in the report it says 7 internal properties. 2 more came to light after we concluded the report on Sheep Walk Lane, and we've included those in the report, and it quite often happens sometimes that properties come to light after the main event. The main source of the flooding, we believe, was from excessive overland flows, and the subsequent surface water runoff followed the topography of the land and accumulated in the low spots in Ravenshead. I'm really pleased to be able to report that our investigation found that all the relevant risk management authorities involved in this incident responded appropriately and effectively, and we're continuing to work with them and our partners and colleagues from Fire East Midlands to look at mitigations and solutions. So since the event in April, we've worked with the community. We've offered individual property flood resilience measures to those properties that were internally flooded. Via have undertaken some gully cleansing, and they've looked at doing some ditch clearance, which is now complete. And we're now looking with the community at solutions that might be possible to mitigate for any further flood risk. So I'd just kind of like to conclude by saying thank you to those in the community who were affected and who worked tirelessly to help their neighbours who were struggling. It was really evident that community pulled together to help one another. And our ask of committee today is that you support the recommendations in the report and you approve the publishing of it in line with the legislation under the Act. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Sue. Any questions or comments on it, Councillor Oliver?
Thanks, Sue, for that report. Flooding is like a personal tragedy. That's how I refer to flooding. It affects a lot of people in a lot of different ways. I actually didn't have much to comment on this until I witnessed it firsthand a couple of days ago, especially in Eastwood on Garden Road. An investigation's obviously been launched into the flooding, which we're all aware of. And how I'm going to link this back to the report is as follows. The flooding incident obviously happened at 5 a.m. on Monday, and it was a result of a planning issue which had arisen from a development of Avon Homes. Um, what the issue that we're looking at, the reality is, unless we get to grips with the flooding issues linked to development, we'll keep seeing these Section 19 reports coming through before this committee. So I hope that the developers of Avon Homes fully compensate residents and now withdraw their ridiculous plan to build 104 homes, but that's another matter, obviously. But my question is, what can we do as a council to support these residents in the fight against flooding, and what authority do we have as a lead flood authority to recommend to local councils refusing planning applications that lead to developments that are causing these issues, and also working with the town councils, the local councils, and perhaps via in terms of unblocking the drains. I personally know that Eastwood and Brinsley are probably terrible for it, but I think you can see where I'm coming from in terms of that, Sue. And my question is, what can we do to support our residents?
So, sorry, if I can just interject quickly. We obviously wouldn't want to preempt the results of any investigation that's happening in yours. So,
Yeah, no, that's not what I'm asking.
you're sort of asking
I'll repeat the
in
question
general.
again. Yeah, what as a council are we doing to support, to prevent any further Section 19s coming before this committee? And as the lead flood authority, can we recommend to local councils refusing planning applications to get more involved before these situations happen? I think Sue, before you interjected, was nodding her head and kind of understood my question, Chair. So thank you.
Thank you for the question. Devastating set of circumstances out in Eastwood to see that firsthand. So there are a number of things. So as a lead local flood authority, we have a number of statutory responsibilities. One of those is around planning. So we comment on developments and major developments to the LPAs. Now, our comments are made in good faith. They follow planning legislation. It is the LPA's decision as to whether they follow that planning guidance, and that's outside of our statutory responsibilities. So we make the recommendations. We often have very good conversations with the districts about those comments, but the ultimate decision on planning sits with the districts and not with us. In terms of working with those communities, we offer a number of measures, one of which is a flood warden scheme. So we ask communities to get involved in flood warden schemes to help them protect their communities. Would not have worked in your instance in Eastwood because that was a breach in exceedance, and it was something that came at 4 o'clock in the morning out of nowhere. The other things that we can do is, and we do this quite often, is work with developers to look at sustainable drainage measures, and they quite often ask for us for their advice as to how they can work with those communities, and we pursue that quite strongly with them. We do have the powers to influence. We don't have lots of teeth, if I'm honest. But we do work and we do raise awareness, and we do try to work with the towns and parish councils and the districts on a regular basis on flood matters. And if you'd like to talk about Eastwood outside of this meeting, I'm more than happy to do that.
Thank you very much for that response. Anything to add, Councillor Oliver, before we move on? Councillor Carr.
Yeah, I'm pleased to see this report and pleased that everybody did their bit in Ravenshead. My experience of officers at this council is that if something like it happens, they do a fantastic job. I have recent experience in my. I'm going to rename my division Bramcote and Beeston in water. I think Beeston town centre has flooded twice recently, quite severely. Bramcote is becoming a huge issue because there are roads like that, and none of them have got. They're that old. They've not got surface drains to take the water away, so they get to the bottom and flood the houses at the bottom. And it is becoming a big issue in my division. as it was in Ravenshead. I have to say that, yeah, I had a look at the outline permission for Lincroft, which is the one in Eastwood, and our department raised no objection so long as there was a surface drain water plan. Then the Borough Council took the report that was commissioned by the applicant as the surface drain water plan. So you're right, you can make recommendations, but the boroughs don't have to fail them. And we saw the result of that this week because there was no surface drain water plan in that particular area. I just would like to ask, and perhaps we can have a discussion about what is happening with Section 19s in Beeston and Bramley, because there has been severe flooding over the last few weeks. And I'll mention this, but it's not a criticism, Sue. I'm trying to help you out as the manager. I noticed that 2 of your principal flood risk management officers are being used in the programme for electrical veer point charging. And I would have thought they'd have enough to do at the moment with flooding, let alone having that responsibility as well. Thank you.
Can I just expand your question slightly? A question I'd got was what sort of constitutes us getting one of these Section 19 reports, of how bad in general, not just the ones you've mentioned, but in general, how bad does something have to get before it comes as a formal report to this committee?
Okay, great question. So, Nottinghamshire County Council's trigger for a Section 19 report is 5 or more properties internally flooded. So, that's what it is.
Councillor Oliver?
I personally think 5 is not low enough. I know it's law, and that's the difficult that we probably face. But when you see the residents that I've been speaking to, and they've got 4 houses out of 5 that have been internally flooded, and when I mean internally flooded, it was up to your knees. How the 5th one hasn't come about yet is beyond me, but perhaps it will arrive later on. But is there any way perhaps possible that we can lower that? Is that something we could put forward to government? I'm not really sure in the route that would take, but however, I would suggest 3 or more is more than enough to trigger a Section 19, because this is the devastation of people's lives, and certainly of what happened in Eastwood.
Sue?
Councillor Carr's right in his observation. It is a legal requirement, but a Section 19 report, the purpose of a Section 19 report is to make sure that all the risk management authorities did as they were supposed to do. It doesn't mean that we walk away from those people or that they get any less of a service because there was only 1, 2, 3 or 4 people internally flooded. So our investigation remains the same whether it's 1 or it's 250. We will walk the same road with those people, and we will then start to talk to them about flood mitigation measures, property level protection, and we'll work really closely with them. So please don't think that we will walk away from them because there were only 4. It's just the trigger to the Section 19 report, which is a report that looks to see if risk management authorities did what they were supposed to do.
Okay. Anybody else on this one before we move on? Okay. So I will formally move that the committee has approved the publishing of the Section 19 report, and that we endorse the work outlined in the report. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Carr, thank you very much. All those in favour of that? That's unanimous again. Thank you very much. Okay, so we move on to item number 7. Sorry, thank you very much, Sue, for attending. Thank you for those answers. Item number 7 on the agenda today is the proposed scope regarding the household waste recycling provision. Martin, you're going to introduce this report for me.
Yeah, so this comes from the discussions that happened at the last committee meeting in July, where it was agreed that a task and finish working group be established to look at the household waste recycling centre provision and to look at the review work that's been carried out so far with a view to making some recommendations. So we've been working with officers and the chair to draft a scope, which is attached to the appendix. So we're just looking for the approval of the scope today, and then the work will be carried out during October and November. So we're just trying to sort out dates, so ideally we'll get those sent out in the next week, hopefully, once they've been agreed. But there'll be a meeting, and then there'll be a site visit to some of the household waste recycling centre sites, so you can see what different ones are. It won't be every single one, but there will be visits to show illustratively what the general provision is like. And then there'll be a second meeting to consider further information before we then meet to discuss the recommendations. But we'll hopefully get the dates out to you very shortly. We'll be looking for volunteers as well to take part in the review.
Thank you very much for that, Martin. I'll open it up to questions and other suggestions. Councillor Carr?
Thank you. I think Martin knows what I'm going to say because I said it at health scrutiny as well. I do get a little concerned when we sat here and before a task and finish group working group has been appointed that actually the scoping has already been set for them. I can appreciate that some of that should be done because otherwise they'll be sat there twiddling their thumbs for the first three meetings. But will that actual task working party be able to add or remove scoping that we've possibly agreed today? And the other thing is, of course, when we come to probably looking at the Rushcliffe part of it and the additional centre, will this working group be able to see the report, the independent report that was done on recycling sites in Rushcliffe, because it's been put back and put back and put back, and I think if they're not able to see that, then they're not going to be able to come to any conclusions with regards to provision in Rushcliffe. Thank you.
Well, so I mean, this isn't necessarily to do with the actual provision in Rushcliffe. This is to do with the provision across the whole county. I think the scope's been sort of drafted as quite a wide sort of area. I mean, I've already had comments from people saying it's not narrow enough, and then you're suggesting almost the opposite. So I think in that respect, it probably is kind of wide enough that once the task and finish group get together, that they can decide what they're going to sort of laser focus on within it, as opposed to sort of just an all-encompassing, everything involved. So,
yeah,
what do you want to add to that?
I think from experience, when you actually get into the review process, like how the group starts discussing things, we'll focus on different particular things. That it is to give a focus. It's not to say if a question is asked, it won't be, well, that's not there, you can't ask it. It is just to ensure that they are focused. And with the creation of the scope, the chair and the vice chair being involved in the development of this with officers who are offered like the technical guidance, but it has been the chair leading on what is actually included in the scope.
Yeah,
and I think quite often something might crop up. It certainly has in the ones that we've done previously. Something crops up that we probably hadn't even thought of in the scoping that we'll happily sort of look at the time and include it as necessary. I'm quite flexible on it in that respect.
I wasn't suggesting it was too narrow. I think it is wide, and I appreciate that, but I do think that the working group should be able to see reports, whether it's Rushcliffe or whether it's anything else about provision of recycling sites. Otherwise, they won't be informed as to future decisions.
I mean, I sort of agree in principle, but if such a report hasn't been finished, then we probably can't see it in that respect. But if a report's finished and completed, then I see no reason why we shouldn't have it. But again, that's on the premise that it is completed by them. Anybody else, Councillor Gowland?
It's a really minor point, but it's got 4 bullet points on the scoping. This is, and the fourth one has a sort of sub point, a set of potential to expand the reuse offer. I'm being really pedantic here, but I think there's meant to be a space, like a new line before that fourth point. I hope so, because I think that's a really important point, the final point, which I assume is the sort of recycling. Yeah, thank you.
Martin's just indicated that it's a.
I'm not being totally pedantic.
A typo rather than anything.
Yeah, it's a really important point. Just want it highlighted.
No, thank you very much for bringing that. Anybody else? Okay, Councillor Carr.
Just briefly to answer your question as to whether this report exists or not, or whether it's finished. January 23, the papers of this committee, it said that a detailed operational and strategic recommendations had been drawn up by a consultant, so it must exist.
I genuinely can't comment on that because other than having seen that, but I've certainly not. It's not been presented to me. I don't know that it's completed, but I'll reiterate what I said before.
I've said that to help you.
Yeah, no, thank you, and I appreciate that, and I take it in that spirit. I'll reiterate what I said before. If it's out and in and completed in the public domain, then it'll be discussed as part of it. Anything else from anybody? So I'll formally propose that recommendation and the scoping that's been done so far. Can I have a seconder for that? Councillor Carr, thank you very much. All those in favour of that? That's unanimous, thank you. And what I would say is that if either members of this committee or others, if you want to be involved in this task and finish group, sort of get in touch with Martin. I'm assuming it's going through you, Martin, and put your name forward from each group, and we'll we might have to narrow it down if there's 50 councillors put their hand up for it, but because it could get a bit unwieldy, but certainly we'd like to have a real sort of cross, not just cross party, but a cross county wide selection of councillors involved in that, and let's get to a good result on it. Thank you very much. So I'll move to the last item on the agenda, which is the work programme. The work programme is going to be presented by Martin.
Yeah, so we had this overview a couple of weeks ago. So obviously the work programme has been created over the summer, like I say, with the chair and officers, and obviously we had suggestions from yourselves, and they've all been put together. And as you say, it is quite a busy work programme, and there's still quite a few items to be scheduled that we can bring up. And so just note, as always, if there are any additional items that you would like consideration being given to, just let myself and the chair know, and then we can look to see where they could fit in. But like I say, it is quite full at the moment.
Any questions or comments on it, Councillor Carr?
Right, what I was going to suggest that when we were talking about flooding not long ago, it can either be on the work programme, or we can, as a committee, ask for this information to come to us by email, that we get a list of what Section 19 investigations are going on at the moment. I don't want any detail about where they are. I think just a list of what Section 19 investigations are taking place at the moment.
Sorry, I don't see any reason why we can't give a list of what those are. I don't think that needs, I think, as you say, it doesn't need a formal recommendation, but I'm sure that can be forthcoming. That's not a problem. Councillor Oliver?
Just a quick one, really. Obviously, we did the bus network review. It's not on the work programme until the 27th of March, yet the consultation with just the county councillors was completed by the end of May. This means that we'll be nearly waiting 11 months for any action on the key issues that impacts the residents in our areas, in every part of the county, in fact, including Eastwood and Broxtowe. What are the reasons for the delay? Can this not be brought forward to the meeting on December the 20th, as it's a detrimental impact to the residents?
Thank you for that. I mean, it's the sheer amount of work that we've got to go through on this with this committee. My vice chair is in your group, and he was at those meetings where that was agreed, as far as I recall. So he's been involved in those decisions. All I can say is that's unfortunately how it's dropped, because I think if we moved something else, I can assure you that somebody would go, that was vital, and that should have been in December as well. So sadly, I think sometimes things have to be moved, and the work programme, just for the amount of time. Otherwise, we could have a meeting that lasted 2 days long, probably in December, and get it all done, and then have nothing else to do. So, Martin?
Yeah, a lot of the consideration was like agenda management, not having too much items on one agenda, and obviously in December we have got highways coming to that meeting, so I'm sure there will be quite a lot of discussion about that. And because of that, we've not tried to put excessive amounts of other items, because that could be a very long meeting if we, and then obviously if everyone gets tired, it becomes less relevant. So we really need to keep the agendas nice and tight so we can have good meetings.
Yeah, absolutely, and I've said before as well. I'm not averse, if necessary, that we we potentially add a meeting in the diary somewhere between December and March. That's sort of dependent on officer availability and everything. But I'm certainly not averse to doing that as necessary. Councillor Gowland.
At the risk of saying two things, first of all, I wonder if school maintenance could be added. Obviously, it's not just a case of worrying about the concrete issue, but of course, if efforts are necessarily diverted to that, the rest of the school is going to be in trouble. I'm aware of a very old school that definitely hasn't got concrete in it, but it definitely needs maintaining. And secondly, this meeting's lasted an hour and a half. We meet 3 times a year. I feel that maybe there's room for a bit more work and scrutiny. But anyhow, thank you.
Yeah, well, you've sort of said kind of what I was kind of alluded to before. So, as I say, if things come up that we need to scrutinise, or we need to meet more regular, then we will do so, provided that officers have got A, the capacity, and B, the availability to come to the meeting. So, it would be a waste of time for us to say, oh, let's have a meeting every month, and there isn't officer capacity to be able to put together the stuff that we're wanting to scrutinise. But yeah, in principle, totally agree with what you've just said. Councillor Oliver?
I think you've just hit the nail on the head there. Is it possible, I'm not sure if we can do this, to put a recommendation in for us to look for another slot, or perhaps another few meetings to ensure that this scrutiny committee is doing what it is there to do? And like I say, I'd be happy to be here till 6 o'clock if it gets what's right for the residents that have elected me.
I'm not exactly sure what the plan is, but as members know, we have got the CFGS at the moment supporting us with like a review of screening activity. And I know I'm meeting with them this afternoon, and I know the chairs and vice chairs and also senior officers have also got meetings scheduled with them over this week, next week, the coming weeks. So I'm sure in the discussions that, like I say, the frequency of scrutiny meetings will be something that they'll be asking about and how members are finding that. And that's obviously that can be discussed with them, and obviously then we'll come to it in their final report.
Yeah, I think kind of what we're trying to say, Councillor Oliver, is I'm not in disagreement with you. But I just want to throw some caution to it in the fact of sort of officer time and availability, and but in general, I'm kind of agreeing with you that there's a possibility we do need to have more meetings or more frequent meetings to discuss the ever growing work program. So yes, it's in progress. I don't think it necessarily needs a recommendation, but it's something that's being looked at more generally in terms of the scrutiny process as a whole at the county, and also Martin will back me up. I've mentioned this on numerous occasions about the potential of having an extra meeting given the amount of stuff that we've got to go through in the next sort of 2-3 meetings that's on the work program. So I hope that at least sort of allays some of your concerns. Councillor Introna.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Without telling anyone how to suck eggs, I'd certainly prefer us to have an extra half an hour per meeting and deal with another agenda item rather than come to a separate meeting, which is an hour's journey time in each direction for myself. And I dare say, once with preparation and everything, it's more than that for everyone sat in the room. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a difficult one when you try to put together an agenda for a meeting, and you're trying to guess how long each item is going to take. And to be honest with you, I've been slightly surprised by how quick a couple of them have gone today. So I think this could have quite easily have gone on for another hour in my estimation. So. It's one of those things where I think the more we do the scrutiny at the county, the more we're going to understand kind of how long each of these items are going to take, and we're going to get better at sort of organising an agenda for a meeting. But I certainly take your point. Yes, absolutely. I like the idea of that. Is there anything else from members? Okay, if we can put that recommendation forward about the work programme. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lee just got there first. All those in favour? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Thank you very much for your attendance this morning, and I wish you a very good day. Thank you.